Thank you. Calling the Transportation Committee meeting to order at 4:03 p.m. At this time, roll call. I have Alderman Savage to my right and Alderwoman Pindell Charles to my left. So we have a quorum. Can I get a motion for the approval of the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, agenda approved. Can I get a motion for approval of minutes from 4/12/23?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Minutes approved. Great. Next up on our agenda, we have AP 1523, which is Transportation Board, Edward Bergman, who we happen to have in our presence today. Would you like to say anything, Mr. Bergman?
I'm not sure what I should say.
Do you want to introduce yourself? If you'd like to come up to the mic and turn it on.
Of course. Is it on? You can get that up. Maybe that's better.
Yes, sir.
Well, of course, like many of us who live here, we're all worried about what's going on. Anybody who drives or bikes, as I do, in the streets of Annapolis has difficulty, and the same goes for parking and all kinds of residential life. So I find this, not unlike everyone else, troublesome, and I'm interested in helping.
Great. We appreciate it. Questions? Alderman Savage.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you go explain a little bit about sounds like you do have a background in transportation planning, something along those lines? Regional planning, it looks like.
Mainly regional planning, although I worked for a highway department for a few years and did construction management, that sort of thing. But yes, most recently, well, in the last 30 years, I guess, it's been mainly regional planning and regional development. Mostly in the US, but almost 2 decades in Europe as well.
Okay.
So I've had, the transportation system of Vienna, where I lived for 17 years, is a marvel. And they did this with a very old city. So there probably are still some solutions, although of course the development footprint here is very constraining. So yes, I know what I would like to see, and I also realize what's probably possible.
Mm-hmm. Well, what are some of the areas you see some improvement that could be needed?
Well, as a biker, I really would like to see better and safer access to bicycle, I wouldn't say transit, but at least mobility. And I know that's hard with the street configuration and the acceptance by drivers of others on the road with 2 wheels. We've all had that problem if you've been biking. It's not just in town, it's pretty much the US as a whole, except a few cities where it's much more widely accepted. So that's a main interest. Certainly parking is always a problem. And the transit system itself, I also taught in Chapel Hill for a long time.
Yeah.
And Chapel Hill finally got around to negotiating with the university to run the bus system without charge. Mm-hmm. So it's free anywhere in the city. I don't know what the finances are in terms of that possibility here, but some improvement in terms of access, and maybe improvement also in the system itself. Obviously, it all boils down to money in the end.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Appreciate the answer. And thank you for your interest. It sounds like it'd be a good fit for you. And yeah, we look forward to seeing more of you.
Okay.
Questions? Alderman
Yes.
Pindell Charles.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Bergman. Thank you so much for volunteering for this position. We really do appreciate it. I see you have a very impressive resume, and we look forward to working with you. And one of your references is Miss Shelley Rowe, and I know her.
Oh,
So
do you
that's-
know Shelley?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, she's a dear friend.
Yes, well, very good. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. I will entertain a recommendation for favorable approval to the council.
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. It's a favorable recommendation to the council, and we'll be back in touch once the council meets again. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next up on our agenda is legislation, 04922, Planning and Zoning, Parking and Loading Regulations. And we have in our audience Phil Dales, who would like to say a few minutes of testimony.
Thank you very much, Ms. Chairman. I just wanted to say a few things about the big picture on this legislation, and then a couple of points on a detail related to one of the amendments that's been offered. So there were originally two bills that would have accomplished this general policy end of allowing restaurants to reduce their parking to 0 spaces with a payment of a fee into the transportation fund. And the remaining bill of 49 that's before you today seems like it enjoys general support from the many members of the council, the public, planning commission, and key members of the mayor's administration. But it does make sense that we're still here talking about the details of how that reduction would be permitted, and what conditions we might attach to it. But one of those restrictions should not be a cap on the benefits of this policy for one single block in the city to reduce the amount by which you could reduce parking to 50%. And I think that's especially true for an area of the city where the OCD design district is, that is in a urban design, walkable part of town, with some historic old lots that really would most benefit from the ability to remove surface parking and introduce outdoor dining. So if there are any good reasons found to limit that one block of really 4th Street in the Eastport area to a 50% reduction of the current parking requirement, I think additional amendments should be proposed to at least allow those restaurants affected by that amendment to go all the way down to 0 by addressing the impacts of removing parking at their properties. For example, if it's found that the reduction to 0 would impact churches or charitable organizations, then the ability for a restaurant on 4th Street to provide parking to those institutions as they reduce their parking below that 50% limit would be a good way of solving that. Or if it's found that the introduction of outdoor dining on those properties would have an impact on nearby residences, then a condition requiring screening and buffering of visible or audio impacts from the outdoor dining could be a condition of reducing below that 50%. And then finally, if it's thought that rideshare could be part of the solution in addition to walking and biking to the property, then I would say that requiring a rideshare drop-off area, a designated pickup point at these properties would be another way to condition removing or going below that 50% reduction. So I think I'd like the committee to keep that in mind as you consider the amendments that are out there, both the cap that would, I think, negatively keep it to 50%, and ways to further amend that to allow people to address any concerns, especially for really small properties. Thank you.
We appreciate it. Thank you. Do committee members have questions, comments? No.
In general?
In general.
Well, so just as a refresher, from my own train of thought as well, but the origin of this was we voted down a proposal to completely remove parking requirements for restaurants. And so the origin of this is that this, I think this was introduced around the same time as kind of an alternative. It doesn't reduce the parking requirements, but just simply allows for a restaurant, for the moment, just restaurant property owners, business owners to get a waiver on all of their parking. And that's, I believe, as it's currently written. There are a number of amendments. I have thoughts on a number of them. I have my own kind of amendment I'd like to bring up at some point. Because I do think that, again, the whole idea with the legislation is to raise some fees when when people do seek the parking waiver. And one of my amendments will kind of close the loop on that to, instead of, I think as was mentioned in testimony, instead of the transportation fund, my amendment would be to create a brand new mobility fund that would go, it could potentially go towards some transit, but it's more oriented on providing alternatives to automobile. And just my thinking is that we need to raise some money to help build out some mobility centers, and even if also bike lanes, those kind of things, as a viable alternative. But also with in my ward, seniors I have a lot of seniors, probably the highest concentration of senior housing in the city. And so I think any kind of money raised could go towards, for example, possibly going towards some kind of silver shuttle, for lack of a better name, some kind of disability senior, and also maybe ADA silver blue kind of shuttle that could be utilized, perhaps even just on demand. This, I think, will need a lot more conversation with the director of transportation over the next few months. But as far as where the money might go, but that's kind of one way I'm trying to think of it. If parking is removed, how are the seniors going to get down there as far as my constituents? And that's where I think if we could have an amendment to try to, I guess, engage in some of that conversation, but I don't want to get too far in the weeds. I'm kind of all over the place with my comments right now, but that's just my overall thinking as far as this legislation. I support the underlying idea, but some of the amendments I have some problems with, some I don't. But I think, yeah, I'll stop there for now.
Did you have any additional questions?
No, thank you.
Thank you. I agree that there are some of the amendments also are sort of canceling one another out, and should be discussed. And I believe before making a formal recommendation to the council that we perhaps table it until we've had a chance to look at all of the amendments. Do you agree? Do you agree?
Yes, Madam Chair, I do.
So we have a motion to that effect?
Yeah, so you'd want to just table it till the next meeting? I'm just thinking if there's anything we could get out of the way today before we
Do you want to talk through the
adjourn.
amendments?
We could always start going through some of them. I mean, I'll do whichever you want, Madam Chair.
Yeah, I'm happy to go through and discuss if you'd like to. Should we start with Amendment 1?
Yeah, I think that's my
That's true.
amendment.
Actually, before we go to that, I will acknowledge that we do have Director Moore from Transportation, and we also have Chief of Staff Kate Pettit.
good.
I had asked both to be here in case we had questions. Do we think we have questions of Kate, or do we want to talk through them and perhaps call her back? So that she doesn't have to sit there through our
Yeah, we could start there if you
questions
want.
of Kate?
Yeah, because I think part of the conversation is going to involve. So one of the concerns with, I think, especially just to be frank about it, some of the folks in Eastport and maybe even some, I don't know, parts of Ward 2, but parts of our ward that have difficulty as far as if we do have a scenario which this legislation would enable where somebody could remove all of their parking requirements, there is some concern about, especially again in Eastport, about if that's the case, then they're worried that the on-street parking is going to be used up because the waiver would just be for the off-street parking requirement. So that's their concern. And unlike other parts, like especially downtown, we have plenty of parking garages. It's really not an issue as far as finding someplace to park. And I don't think it's, especially with the parking district in place, it's not really an issue for parking being taken up from the residents. Eastport, I could see it is a little different. And so I'm trying to think about how do we address that parking concern? Because I do support the broader vision of getting rid of some of the parking and putting in some other kind of usable space, be it outdoor dining, but I think even the next stage would be looking at office buildings. And if, for example, if they can provide proof that their employees are using alternative methods to get to work, parking elsewhere, biking, whatever, carpooling, that they might be able to remove their parking and do some, their parking spaces and do something else with those as well. So for Eastport, not even my ward too, it's not as big of an issue for my ward, but we do have some areas of parking challenges. But I'm thinking the idea that's been, I think, mentioned before, and I know the mayor's been big on the mobility centers, and I know it's also in part of the Eastport Lofts, the shopping center redevelopment project it's actually a condition, I can't remember if it's from the planning commission or from the court case, but some kind of condition regarding including a mobility center that's going to have space for, I think, the EV shuttles that we have and for the scooters. And so I think those mobility centers, for example, you could put one in, I'd love to see one in the Giant Shopping Center, because I kind of see this as different from, our transit system seems to be geared a lot towards getting folks to work, which is a good thing. But I see the mobility centers as supplementing that, but in some ways serving a bit of a different. So for example, people would go park at the Eastport Shopping Center, Mobility Center, and take a shuttle to the businesses in Eastport or even across the bridge, or to take the electric ferry. In Ward 7, if we had one at the Giant Shopping Center, I could see people parking there and taking electric shuttle down to downtown, down to Eastport, or they could take it maybe, if we can get some more mixed use on Forest Drive, taking it down to another center down there perhaps. So I could see the benefit to that. And so I just wanted to get an idea of, so if we do pursue the idea of removing parking, again, especially in Eastport, I think it's going to be helpful if we can definitively point towards a mobility center and give some definition about if that's what the status is of those efforts and what your vision might be. And that's where, again, maybe we don't necessarily need the answers today, but at some point I think it'd be good to, because it's going to come up in conjunction with this discussion of the legislation.
Thank you, everybody. And Kate Pettit, Chief of Staff to Mayor Buckley, and Alderman Savage, I think you summed up a lot of the aspects of the mobility policy that we're looking at. And I know that Director of Transportation up here with me can speak to probably more of the details on the ground. But I think the way I would summarise the policies we're taking forward at the moment that you've referred to is that we know that we're transitioning our mobility culture and approaches and moving to try more towards more sustainable transportation. And the electric mobility options, micro-mobility options are one part of that. The trolley that we used, the electric e-cart trolleys that we used around Maryland Avenue and downtown area over the past few months while the Hillman Garage was being rebuilt, that was brought in as a solution for that stage of the work, but the long-term vision has been to take them out to Eastport. So we would be running the 10-minute trolley to Eastport and using the 5th Street street end there, where we propose the electric ferry will operate in the future as a transportation hub, and the Eastport Shopping Centre as a transportation hub. And I know the Director of Transportation has been doing some scoping with the Mayor, looking at the routes for that. So we are hoping we can implement that 10-minute trolley fairly soon. And I'll let Marcus talk more to that. There is also the plan, I think, of the long-term electric e-car, the electric trolley, the green bus, that will replace the purple bus. And I know we're looking at routes that will take us over to Eastport for that service as well in the future, I understand. And I believe there are some other parking assets that we're looking to unlock in future. There's some other lots. One of the Mayor's proposals was that we could look at underutilised private assets in Eastport in the future and look at potentially look at arrangements to use those assets, outside business hours, whether it be a school parking lot or some other underutilised lot. So that was another option that was put on the table as part of a sort of a 10-point plan that we were developing in consultation with some of the residents of Eastport and business owners. There is that plan to create transportation hubs that will help connect all of our micromobility options, both at the Eastport Shopping Centre. I believe the Giant that you referenced is part of that plan as well. And of course, back to 5th Street, where the electric ferry will be the first place that it will operate. And we're in the process of the feasibility study, engaging in that process to look at that. And as you know, we have the grant funding to start looking at the infrastructure and what we need to deliver that service. Marcus can probably speak more to the timeline and detail on that as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, good afternoon, panel, Madam Chair, Savage, Ms. Findale-Charles. What we're looking at with the mayor is looking at a schedule for Eastport that we can potentially connect those areas, as our Chief of Staff mentioned, with 5th Street. And there is a garage on 7th Avenue near 4th. I believe it is actually a public garage. That is the only one that is in Eastport. We may get in a little trouble if we try to use Eastport, if we come in there with a trolley, a bus, the little electric cart, and we start seeing, the management of that Eastport Shopping Center sees more parked cars there. Just being careful of that. So trying to connect those areas that we want to do with 5th Street and 4th Street and all around, just keeping it within the side of Eastport versus coming across the bridge. Because there's certain times we can get stuck there and it can take us literally 30, 40 minutes of those times. It was really, really needed, but walking traffic would be a lot better than vehicular traffic. So what we're looking at is what would the route be? What would it look like to do something like what we're doing on the other side with West Annapolis, where we look at Calvert Street to West Street to Church Circle, State Circle, Maryland Avenue, back around. Connecting the Calvert Street garage, the Gotch and Whitmore garage to downtown. That was just running Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So it served its purpose. It is serving its purpose. So we want to look at something similar to the Eastport area that we can kind of connect people. And as we grow the mobility plan, the Annapolis mobility plan, we look at changing out certain things. The electric vehicles are coming in 12 to 14, 16 months. Most likely we'll start out on where the Magenta shuttle is. And as we grow, the lead time right now on electric vehicles of that size is a little bit longer. But there is a plan to kind of move forward with this. A part of this mobility plan is also microtransit. The microtransit on-demand service that differs a bit from our fixed route, but it's kind of a feeder into it. So when you start looking at, as Alderman Savage talked about, Baywoods, the senior center, is it really a need to have a bus go down every 45 minutes or on demand, 4 or 5 times a day, that we need to do that. So we can connect to more of the city. And this is something that we're looking to do. The RFP has already come in. Kwaku Dua of my staff is the project manager on reviewing those bids that have come in to look at a Prosper to give us the software as a solution that we can take those kind of reservations like VIA is doing right now. So we have a short-term plan of what we want to do that includes the electric carts. We have to just be careful how we go about that, but also includes how we want to look at connecting more of the city as the footprint for fixed route and the spines that are coming off of it with the on-demand and other think out of the box initiatives that may just go in a certain area, as we talked about Eastport, and like what the electric cart was doing or is doing right now on the other side of town. I think that unless you had some other specific questions or want to add into that.
And if I could just add, the 10-minute trolley, I think, option is, the thinking around that is really around that now that the Hillman Garage is rebuilt and open, and we're going to be monitoring capacity over the next few months and try and track how it's being used. It's early days, but currently, you know, we see there's parking available. So we see that as really helping to unlock that as a parking asset to get people to Eastport and back on that trolley without having to bring, you know, parking to the Eastport Shopping Centre. I think the mayor has been, I think his thinking is at the moment that we may have to look at other options. You know, can we do something around adding parking assets into Eastport? Potentially, if the shopping centre is redeveloped, can we create a parking asset there? And that's on the table, but we don't know the timeline, obviously, for that. But I think the goal is to help try and use the assets in downtown and make sure we have connections that are easy and cheap and attractive. And the idea that, you know, we make these micro transport options kind of part of the experience of Annapolis, so that actually attractive options that people will want to use is part of the goal as well.
Yeah, thank you. Can I follow up?
Yeah.
Yeah, and regarding the timing for the Eastport Shopping Center, I'm going to check with Mr. Smith, Director Smith, but I think that now might be a good time because I think he's on the verge, I think, of completing his adequate public facility approval. But if I understand it, the process correctly, there was a condition regarding them providing some kind of cooperation and dedication for the mobility center. But now might be the time because they're probably putting together their design for the final permit review for grading and permit and stormwater and whatnot. So I don't know how much needs to get negotiated in at this point.
That's a really good point,
Yeah.
Alderman, and I think that may have been what had triggered the mayor's thinking around now is the time to raise that question of the parking asset as well as the transport hub. That was proposal was on the table, so I'll make a note to pursue that. Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. And wherever's the parking garage, you said you mentioned there is one in Eastport?
It's underneath Carroll Street.
Yeah,
Oh, that one.
yeah. It's
Part of it's public, right?
part of it, yes. And it's not that big, but there is public parking there. It's like diagonally across from Boatyard Grill near 4th
Yeah.
Street.
I used to work there, above that building, that garage, but how many spots roughly are down there?
I don't remember. I can check into that and find that out specifically.
Is that administered by our parking group or is that
It is
private?
not
They
private.
just,
Yeah.
so they just committed a certain number of their private spots to the public?
Yeah, yes.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, if they have vacancies, maybe they might be able to offer more of them. Well, that's kind of another conversation to have as far as, you know, if they're operating off of set parking requirements for minimum spaces for their office complex, you know, the council might be able to, yeah, that's one thing I'd like to look at some point is reducing the parking required at these facilities, and maybe more of them could be dedicated towards either public parking or some other mobility. And yeah, because I think with those mobility centers, they really would only work with a parking district because that's what forces people to look at alternatives, right? I know that's something I think Alderman Arnett might be looking at for Eastport. as far as just throughout this as well for the giant shopping center, there is a lot on the corner down Bay Ridge it's an empty lot. I think in the past they tried to put a restaurant on there. That might be available, but again, just throwing this out there, I'm contemplating in my mind ways to tie this in with the stormwater fee. If we have these large shopping centers like Growls or anywhere else that have these huge parking lots, or a Safeway, or Aldi's, whatever's down there now, huge parking lots, is the city figuring out a way to incentivize them to reduce their impervious surface. Maybe we raise the fee on these certain large lots substantially, and unless they agree to removing part of the lot or converting them into some kind of public use or environmental use. Just to throw that out there. The one question I have, one of my last questions would be funding. And again, I think this legislation would establish a fee, and my amendment in particular would set up a fund, which I think we're trying to word it in a way that it would go towards your efforts that you've described as far as funding. But because I don't know, what's the timing for the Annapolis Mobility Plan, and how does that tie into any kind of federal funds, and as far as being able to pay for some of these efforts?
So there's many parts to the Annapolis Mobility Plan, and of course that brings in the question of all of the walking and cycling trails that are part of the plan as another way to encourage safe alternative transit around the city, and obviously then connect to the region. So I believe we are well along the road towards moving towards detailed planning now for the west-east extension, the WE pathway. That will connect. There will be a connection from that to the College Creek connector, which will take you out to the north of Annapolis. But there's also a plan to extend safe pedestrian and biking trails through to Truxton Park and Hawkins Cove. And that will, the electric ferry and Hawkins Cove are all part of the, taking the ferry to Hawkins Cove is part of that plan. So we, and again, Marcus, you might have some answers to the detail on timing, and I will double check some of this with our planning and zoning colleagues, but I believe we now have good funding to proceed with dredging at Hawkins Cove this financial year. And the time, Marcus can speak to timeline of the ferry service. So I believe we are looking at, at least the next 2 years, 2.5 years of the mayor's term to have the groundwork for those connections in place. We are talking long term, and the WE is front runner because they started planning for that some years ago. But we have funding for dredging, we have funding for the ferry, and we are going to start seeking grant funding around the College Creek Connector component going forward this year.
Okay, great. And I know we also have that Bay Ridge study that Mr. Lashinsky's doing, and I got money in the budget for looking at potential trail connecting Tyler and Bay Ridge. Okay, well, I think that's all. I want to thank you for providing answers to that. I think this is an important, as we mull over amendments for the next meeting, I think it's important to have this information out there to figure out how we can support your efforts.
Thank you. Alderwoman Pinell-Charles.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just kind of looking ahead, I guess. I'm looking at the legislation and I see two references in Alderman Arnett's amendments. One has to do with the Maritime District. The other one has to do with Office and Commercial Design Overlay District. And my thought is, how does this intersect or comport with the comprehensive plan? If it does or it doesn't, I don't know. Which leads me to the next question as to, and I'm always wondering, let's look at the legislation and not dawdle, but is this legislation premature if there is some intersection with that? And also I'm looking at and I'm listening, and we're talking about using empty lots for parking, and I know Alderman Shandelmeyer is big on not having a lot of empty parking lots, but doing something with it as far as housing is concerned. So I'm just kind of looking at all of that and how it integrates one into another.
Thanks, Alderman. I'm not sure I can speak to answer that question with any real clarity. I'm not across the detail of the new comprehensive plan consultation. I'm sure you all know the timeline on that, and I believe the first community meeting, virtual community meeting, is tonight, and that consultation will roll out over the next 4 weeks. I don't believe there's a direct relationship between this and the current concept. I don't think they're exclusive, but I really probably shouldn't go too far. That's just my kind of understanding from what I know. We really probably should refer that question to our planning and zoning experts.
Okay. Okay, well, thank you.
Alderwoman, I might be able to provide a little bit of answer. As far as I understand your question, as far as connection to Alderman Shandelmeyer's idea to put parking in, housing and parking lots. Yeah, so I don't think it's directly related in this sense, because this looks primarily at restaurants, and I think restaurants would be looking to primarily for outdoor dining.
Right.
Now, if we do look towards office space, then that could be something that we'd have to deal with as housing potential.
Certainly, it's a balance.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right. I think that we don't really need to be going through each and every amendment because there are a lot of questions. Do you agree?
Yeah, I think that's fine. I know Alderman Arnett is working on one, which we don't have. So, but we should have that next
By
time
the
we
next
meet,
meeting?
and I'll have a chance to refine mine a bit more.
Okay. So, do we have a motion to postpone until the next meeting? Any further discussion?
Nope.
Nope.
We move that we postpone this legislation for a bit more information and knowledge.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. The next meeting on the agenda is Transportation Board update, but I do not see Chairman Regal here. Then we go to ID 3123, which is Transportation Department update. Director Marcus Moore.
Good evening again. Just to give you some updates of what's going on, as you're probably all aware about the garage, the Hillman Garage is now open. Yay, as of last Wednesday. It's open for business. We had the grand reopening last Wednesday. That was held with, several residents and local business owners and elected officials, including the governor, came down to this big event. We're really excited about it. A month earlier than expected, in 13 months. So although it's open, there's still a punch list of things that still need to be done. Supply chain issues delayed the elevators, but they're in. They just need to be certified and approved to be used, which will probably be in the next, let's just say, a week or so. So that's really exciting to see that go from 425 spaces to 590. So there's solar panels on the roof that will collect enough energy to run the garage itself. There's 9 EV charging stations on the first floor. Of course, a regular charger, not the Tesla, because you need an adapter, I believe, to operate, to charge a Tesla. But it's really exciting to see. Signage is changing and wayfinding and all, because you probably will still say that I see garage closed on Raul Boulevard or whatever. So little signs are being made to be changed over that we're open. And we had free parking from Wednesday through the 19th. Our partner in parking, Premium, has been reaching out, working with SP to get those that were monthly parkers before. They're first on the list of, I guess to say the first right of refusal, but nobody's refusing. So they're to be the first ones to come in for the monthly. And, there's two stages, what they call restricted and unrestricted. Restricted is 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Monday through Friday. Unrestricted is whenever you like. Some of the signs that you'll see will have, gateless entry and all. And there's a sign out front that's dynamic. They'll say how many spaces are left. It's still getting all that stuff squared away. So it'll be really exciting to have this open and ready with elevators and all, hopefully before the 4th of July. We're open, but with the elevators and all as well. So that's a really exciting thing that's going on. The other that we're talking about that kind of flows into what we just spoke with micro transit on-demand service. We had an RFP out to run this service that's come in about 2 weeks ago. As I made mention, Kwaku Dua of our staff here has taken the lead as project manager, working with our new procurement officer and maybe one or two other people around the city to evaluate the bids that have come in. And once they score it and figure out a selected vendor, we really hope to start this service probably late summer. Real aggressive would be like a September 1, because we get through the month of August going through the bids and then we start designing it. And as I made mention with the software that we'll be using, it will also update the software that we use to take paratransit reservations now. It works, it's just antiquated. And that service there, you have to make the reservation a day in advance. You can't do same day. So it helped us out a lot with the on-demand service for a lot of the communities that are underserved. We just don't have a fixed route going there. And that's kind of what the Annapolis Go, as you know it, the VIA, powered by VIA, that was put in place for the rebuild, the 14 months. So that'll be, we just had a call there to talk to those partners with us of that winding down in the middle of July. And this will replace it, but there will be a gap in between that ending and us starting with that same kind of service that we would like to, that is being piloted. It's a pilot program that will last at least a year. We'd love to do a little longer. The county's doing something similar. I'm not sure what segment of the county, but Anne Arundel County itself is doing a pilot program for their on-demand as well. So there's a bunch of exciting things going on with parking and transit that more and more will be able to share more detailed information. But I turn to you if you have any questions for me.
Sure. I have one quick question.
Yes.
I understand that the EV stations there's no charge to them, or was that just during the free parking period?
It's still being set up. We're not sure why it was not working the first day. I got to go back and look at my emails, but our premium parking contractor said they should be, if they're not on by now, by tomorrow. I'm not sure what the issue was because they're in and ready to go. But the connectivity with the power itself, I'm not sure what happened.
Okay, great. Alderwoman Pindell-Charles.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have two questions. Number one, I know that the Ward 1 residents, there were many issues that they came in here regarding. Have they been resolved? Just need a little update on that.
Sure. A lot of the Ward 1 residents, just to being heard, how do I get to, how do I fix, where do I go for? A lot of those questions, they've been answered. There's less and less going on now than it was, let's just say 8 months ago when Premium came on board. Most are looking at, if they want to be in the garage, how do I go about it? We come into our new year of RPP. No, we don't like to use acronyms, but residential parking permits, how they go to reestablish that. So last year when they did it was with SP. So this will be the first year for the residents of this Ward 1, Districts 1 and 2, to do it with premium parking. So we've had the two meetings. One was at the Visitor Center on May 17th, and the other one was, I want to say June 8th, but it was here in Council Chambers. Combined, it was more than 75, 80 people. Very good questions. I would say that 95% were answered. We had representation from two people from Premium Parking to kind of, do a PowerPoint presentation or go live on their website of how to get a guest pass and how the passes will work. That's the biggest thing. Somebody's coming over and dropping off something. What do I do? You know, we used to have a few minutes here or there. How do I go about it? Can I extend, not just do one day, each day I got to do another day. And they were showed how to do multiple days of someone staying. So to answer your question, Alderman Pindell Charles, a lot of those have been answered. I wish I could say every single one has been to the satisfaction of the person asking, but we're getting closer to that number being, 100% answered. It's better.
Okay, thank you. And my second question is, I know we have the Annapolis Go and we have some other alternative transportation. Do you keep data on the number of calls or responses that you get for the different wards? I'd be just curious to see in my ward if people are using it, not using it, how they're using it, where they're going, where they're coming from, that sort of thing. It'd be helpful. That way I can kind of get a sense of whether it's working or should it be expanded or should it be changed or that sort of thing.
That's a very good question. We just had a meeting, Kate and I and a few others, with Annapolis Go via. They gave us a bigger, broader picture, but we can ask them to peel that onion back a bit and let's see where the trips are originating and where they're going.
Right.
So we can take a look at that and see if they're keeping it, that level of detail. I definitely know they would definitely get, I think, where they're picking up. But I would think they would have the drop-offs too, but I'll ask.
Yep.
I think part two of your question were the other modes, like maybe a bird, bike, and scooter. That's been, through planning and zoning, Eric Lashinsky probably has a lot of detailed knowledge or information on that. Mm-hmm. But I think we have contact where I can reach out and see the same kind of thing. The biggest complaint there, it's being used, and the city is getting some funds back for it, so it's actually a win-win. The biggest thing is this bike has been here for 3 days, and can you have it? So they have a plan of when they go back to gather them up and put them back into a bird's nest somewhere else that they need to be. But there is I'm not sure if there's a number, but there's an email that we can send to remind folks where they are and can they come get them. There haven't been, I think I saw a few that were just kind of left in the street, but they're very close to the curb kind of thing. I haven't seen any just left haphazardly as a safety hazard, but they have been in parking lots like our Giant or other places that were in the middle of a sidewalk, just need to move them aside. But that's been really a good deal with us.
Yeah, you sent me the link and the information because I was sending you so many emails, the ones I could find in Ward 3. So thank you so much for that.
Alderman Savage?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the pilot program you mentioned, so that's when Annapolis Go phases out, is that it'd be an all-demand pilot program run by your department, right?
Yes.
And not a contractor?
Yes.
Okay.
Substantially cheaper because we're using
I'm
our
sure,
own vehicles and our own employees. And we need to upgrade a system that most of these companies won't sell it to you. You're going to lease it, which is fine. But just being able to go through that, this is something we haven't done. And this is the way of the future to reinvent transportation as people's needs have changed. And you don't really find that a fixed route. There's still a need for that spine and the fixed bus going. But how do we feed into it and how does that work? But we definitely want to cover more ground than what we were before.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. That sounds great. And thank you again for just taking us into the future there. I think we are really on the cusp of some of the just trying to pioneer multiple modes of alternative transportation. I would just on a personal encourage you to, next year might be a good time to attend, for example, the Maryland Municipal League, either the fall or summer, just to maybe talk a bit about how some of our efforts and how they've gone.
I would love to. A lot of our city employees are descending on Ocean City tomorrow.
Yeah.
MML is happening. I have personal family stuff happening this week, and I would love to go. But next year, that's a great, like you mentioned, opportunity to rub shoulders with other colleagues within the state to see how they're doing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I was going to ask the same question about a report on that Alderwoman Pindell Charles asked, but could we, per chance, get Annapolis Go? Because I thought it was helpful when we had Bird come and give their data, and they did present some really good data regarding their coverage, usage maps, and frequency. And I think getting something similar from Annapolis Go might be helpful or
See if we can
interesting.
get them in here in July.
Yeah,
Well, remember, they're winding down, so we can get the information to present,
Okay.
to give their, for us. Because that's what they kind of presented to us today, was
Okay.
what their statistical data showed
Yeah.
going back to May.
Okay.
And, but we can probably get that and still share by ward and just what
Okay.
has happened in the last 13 months.
sounds good.
Great.
And are there any other changes that you think you're going to be making to our downtown particular system now that the garage is completed? I mean, you mentioned Annapolis Go. I mean, yeah, you mentioned the Annapolis Go shift, and that's one reason why that's shifting out. But are you looking to potentially realign the purple or repurpose the purple shuttle back to the circulator, or anything else that?
No, that was kind of a name change from circulator to
Okay.
magenta. We try to make it pop, a marketing splash to look different.
Yeah.
Since I've been here, we've rerouted it to try it different locations to go a different way. This way is hugely successful. We probably carry almost 7,000 to 9,000, depending on what month it is, people combined in a month, opposed to probably a high of 4,500 to 5,000. The closer we're getting into Hillman or getting into downtown, the more expensive parking is. So still connecting Park Place, Knighton, and Gotts coming as you come down, as you go east on West Street to, Duke Gloucester, it's getting more expensive. So we're still seeing that. Park Place is really a gem in the raw that people are still using. It's going to be a lot cheaper, and it's still pretty cheap to get to and inexpensive with the free shuttle. So that one, it will continue to run. We found that we do need two during the week, during rush hour. We just have one on Saturday and then one on Sunday now that the garage is open. Excuse me. We used to have two on Sunday, one from 8 until 1 o'clock, parishioners that could park here because, all of the city garages are free from after 6, before 2. So now they're able to use this again or Gotts close by. So those will still stay. That's been very popular. We want to look on what we did there and how we go about it. But when these electric buses come, that's where they're going to probably go first on that route. And as you were mentioning, the purple becoming green, the Go Green. So do we establish it again? How do we go about it? What does that splash look like? But we're really hoping that those buses will be here sometime in the summer of 2024. Because the order's been placed. We did a lot of our, what we need to see changed with BYD back in March. And there were some supply chain issues that will probably catch up with itself, that we may actually see it next year around this time, plus or minus 2 months. But that's exciting, Alderman Savage, to see what else we can do. Work with the county and how we can just, interconnect. Because they have some ideas about a transit hub on the other side of the mall. And as you made mention of Eastport, there was some study with planning and zoning to have a hub there, doing more of a curb cut as you look at Monroe Street and Bay Ridge Avenue, right there. So you're going to cut into their parking lot a bit, so you're not coming in. So that would be, that hub where buses would change out, and also other events, put some bikes and scooters and everything else. Right now, our change out is right on Monroe Street. That's where all of the transit buses, fixed route with the exception of the orange, will change right now. So doing more there when we look at electric stuff that's just in Eastport will be a great idea. So, that's what we'd love to see happen as we grow.
Yeah. Okay. And are city employees allowed to park in Hillman, the new garage?
They're working on it. There will be some, and that's where, Kate's office, I should say, the city manager and the mayor are working out the details. That's still being worked out, but there will be some coming back.
I'm just curious how that's going to impact the magenta shuttle usage. If you think it's a lot of city employees.
When you look at downtown Gorman Street and City Hall combined, of course, across the street we have a few with MIT and procurement. I think there's only about 130, approximately, plus or minus 10 or so that are here. So say that would be if every single person did come back here, that's, you know, that number plus or minus. But I don't think, I'm almost sure not everyone does or will. I'm not sure if it has to do with telework or just where they may be located. Essential stuff that we'll look at, like fire marshal's office and public safety and all. Some have street parking, and so that won't take away from there as well. So that's still being evaluated, you know, more to follow early next week.
Thank you.
One quick question.
Sure.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Any updates, or you can bring them at the next meeting, Director Moore, on the Annapolis Mall Hub?
Yeah, that's what I was bringing up with the county's doing. I can find out where they are in the process. And what's
Okay.
because the last community meeting that I went to that I think that they had was actually at the mall, at the library at the mall,
Okay.
back in the fall, early winter. And I think they said it was like 2 years off. But I'll get in touch with my counterpart, Director
Mr. Sneed, yeah.
and find out what the timeline is and what it
Okay.
looks like, because they did have some artist renditions of what it looks like, what they hope to get. Everything coming in there for, you know, the Greyhound bus that goes to Harry Truman Park and Ride. You have the Flex bus, and you have all the commuter buses that go to DC and Baltimore. That would be a great, you know, place that they're building, a real building and a place for this big connectivity on the Best Gate side of the mall.
Yeah. Would it be too difficult, and I'll get permission from Madam Chair, for you to come to us maybe every 3 months with an update on what's going on there around, because it really does affect, especially my ward in particular, what goes on in the greater parole area?
Sure, and I guess we have the biggest one. I'll reach out to Director Sneed and see when, you know, what he has now, and, you know, the timeline, and then we can give regular interval updates. That would be
A
good.
quarterly update would be really great.
Yeah, okay.
Is that okay, Madam Chair?
Of course.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
No, I'm good.
Thank you very much for coming and answering all of our questions. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Next item on our agenda is adjournment.
I'll move that we adjourn.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Meeting adjourned.
Thank you.